Pretty excited for today. What is today anyway?
Oh yeah, we're doing landscape photography today. That's our theme. I was looking on Instagram and I found this cool place. I don't want to spoil it yet, so it'll be a surprise when we get there.
Okay.
But I reckon you're gonna be happy with it. I think it's gonna be good.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't been there before though.
So our car got broken down by
By me.
by an unknown force. I'm not pointing the fingers, but we're gonna let them deal with that. And RAC, really fast, roadside assistance.
Well, we've arrived at the destination.
Yeah, this is it. So I saw it on Instagram, thought it looks cool. I have no idea where we are really, but I don't know, do you like it? Do you reckon we can shoot stuff around here?
I've been here before. Yeah,
Right.
I've been here before. This is John Forest National Park, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been here before. It's gonna be fun.
Shit.
Come on. Come on. I'll show you some cool spots I've taken photos of before.
So what's the plan, Reilly?
Well, I want to get down so I can get a good view of these waterfalls. I don't quite know the way yet. This was a bad choice picking somewhere I haven't been to before.
Hello?
You got much?
I got a lot.
Really?
Yeah. But I'm trying to get a long exposure shot of the water so it, like, you know, appears silky smooth. But I don't have an ND filter, so I don't think I can achieve that.
Ah.
Yeah.
He hasn't taken a single photo yet.
Oh, he's still figuring it out?
He's very pedantic, as you know.
Yeah, I know.
Alright. So,
I'm not gonna tell him the secret because I really want to win. I really want to win.
I want you to win too.
But I'm not confident. Like, I'm not, because my landscape, I take landscapes a lot, but you know, it's all on luck. I really, I have to feel it. Right now I'm just not feeling it, you know? I got a couple good shots. Do you get the good shot?
I don't know. It's all a bit meh. It's a waterfall, but it's not like, whoa, it's a waterfall, you know?
You're making me less confident now. I should just, you know, reformat my card.
No, that's kind of what I want to do. I'm really hoping that this tunnel is awesome because, like, otherwise, I don't have a winning photo.
Yeah.
The tunnel's shit for photos, if I'm going to be honest. It's
it?
only good for like portraits and stuff.
Yeah.
Let's see the tunnel.
Get in front of me.
I'm definitely going to be playing this back in real time. Welcome back everybody. So we've just been out to John Forest National Park and these guys have put 4 photos together for your viewing pleasure. We've got a special guest today, Andrew J Clarke on Instagram. Welcome.
Entering in now.
Yeah. He is a landscape and astrophotographer who, may I say, puts some excellent content up online. So you guys should check him out. Now, what do you like to see when you're looking or taking landscape photos?
So it varies pretty dramatically depending on the conditions that you get given. But at the end of the day, I think you want to be trying to really streamline your shots and simplify. And so if you really drill down into what it is you're trying to capture, like what is the subject, what's the cool thing in the shot that you're trying to show off, and then take like steps, whether it's, physically moving to a different position or using some kind of creative technique to showcase, to show off those interesting things. That's going to give you a more effective, photo in terms of communicating with whoever's looking at the photo at a later point.
Would you like to jump straight into it then?
Let's do it.
Okay. So, this is the first photo. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay. Yeah, nice shot. Let's see. So composition-wise, photographer's gone for a sort of natural framing using some of the rocks and the trees to the left and the right of the frame. Long exposure as well. The photographer's had to deal with some pretty harsh shadows here, so you can see like a lot of contrast between the rocks and the trees, in the mid-ground section around the waterfall, So one thing which I talk about a lot when I'm like instructing on landscape photography is managing contrast.
Oh yeah.
Where you've got contrast everywhere in the frame, it often has the effect of flattening.
True.
That makes sense.
So like making it less or reducing like the depth in it or something?
Yeah, exactly. That can be one of the byproducts. So if we look to, the foreground where we've got the smooth water, but also the trees in the midground and also the clouds, we've got darker shadows and brighter highlights everywhere throughout the frame. And that can sometimes hurt your sense of depth and your sense of global contrast. That being said, I think that this is a well captured shot. I do like the framing. The long exposure works well. I'm trying to think. So we've got a bit of motion blur in the clouds and a good amount of motion blur in the water. So I'm assuming this is just one frame somewhere like 30 seconds or
yeah, I believe it was a single exposure.
Yeah, so a nice example of long exposure. I do like the colors. If I'm being critical, maybe those blues are a bit oversaturated. And maybe in contrast with such heavy blues, the greens in the trees feel a bit flat.
Yeah,
but that's
I can see that.
That's more of an editing thing than a problem with the capture. I'm also looking from a technical point of view whether we've got sharpness throughout the frame. One issue you can have doing long exposures is dealing with movement because of wind. So I can see maybe these trees in the mid-ground here, they look a bit blurred. Yeah, there's definitely a bit of blurring going on there, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but when it's right in the middle of the frame, it does capture the catch your eye.
True.
So I do like the composition. I think technically I would have wanted to somehow mitigate the motion blur in the leaves, at least in the middle of the frame.
Yeah, that makes sense. How would you go about doing that?
The most obvious way to do it is to composite.
Yeah.
So you do, because I'm assuming the photographer still wants the blur in the clouds, for instance. And if you've got 30 seconds worth of exposure, that tree is always going to be moving. So you could take 2 frames back to back, one with a faster exposure, even 1 second or something.
Yeah.
Would probably be enough to mitigate a lot of the motion blur in those leaves, but maybe faster to be safe. So 1/200th of a second or something, just to freeze that tree. You would want to take the photos like back to back to make sure there's not too much movement.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but other than that, strong photo. I think the timing here in terms of when this was taken during the day could have been something a bit better. And it's not like it's wrong or it's bad, but you get harsher shadows around that time.
Yeah.
And as I said before, that means you're getting highlights and shadows everywhere in the frame, just makes it a bit distracting.
No, that makes sense.
If this was taken closer to sunset, when the sun's shallower, you're going to get softer light everywhere, and maybe that golden tones coming in. So I would have liked to have seen that example as well. But yeah, by no means a bad photograph.
Cool. All right, let's move on to the next one then.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right, so yeah, we've got a shot facing directly west into the sun. So a few things jump out immediately to me here. Shooting straight at the sun is a really challenging thing to do. You can often end up with a situation like this where you've got a bit of lens flare. It's not always the worst to have a bit of lens flare, but it does make for a really, distracting element right in the middle of the frame. Like going back to what I was saying at the start.
Yeah.
What is it that you're trying to show off? What's the cool thing about the image? Is it a giant circle of light? Is that the cool thing?
I suppose not, because the purpose of these images is to catch the natural beauty of Australia, and then this does tend to cast a lot of shadows towards you, so you're losing a lot of detail in like the foregrounds and I suppose.
Yeah, I think your point about the natural beauty of the Australian landscape could definitely be the theme and the subject of this photo.
Yeah.
Does a big ball of white light, does that work with that theme? Or is it distracting? That's the way I'm processing this image. I'm not saying it can't work, but there's some technical things to keep in mind when trying to take a shot straight into the sun. One is dynamic range. Are we preserving enough detail?
Yeah.
Both in the highlights and the shadow. And then another consideration is lens flare and that sort of thing. What I would have liked to see the photographer do for this shot is if you just wait another 20 minutes or half an hour, you take the same shot.
Yeah, with the sun like actually kissing the horizon.
Yeah, kissing the horizon, kissing those trees. With a smaller pinpoint light source, you can get a lens flare. A sun star, and that can be a much more pleasing sort of look to a landscape image. In terms of what the shadows are doing, I don't mind it. We've got a bit of golden light happening in the foreground, which isn't too bad. So I think again, timing wise, I don't think this was necessarily the most optimal time to take this shot. And a big part of landscape photography is dealing with conditions.
That's true.
Yeah, you can plan your location as much as you want, but if the conditions aren't working, for you at that time, it might not work. So an example here, if we had a cloud bank right in front of where the sun is right now, then maybe we could have got that sun star effect, and maybe it would have softened shadows and that sort of thing. So exact same composition, exact same time of the night, but with a different cloud bank could make the image work more. So patience and is a huge thing in landscape photography. Stepping away from the sun being right in the middle of the frame, just looking at the rest of the image, I think it's a reasonable composition, just generally speaking. We've got a foreground element, the rock grounding the image to the left, and it's got nice breathing room around it. It's not cut off at the edge of the frame. We've got the big tree, which I guess is the most striking element in the frame, a bit left of center. That's quite pleasing. I don't mind the position of the horizon. Color-wise, the treatment of the image, maybe a bit murky.
What would you like to have seen done to it?
I'd be interested to see this one black and white, to be honest.
Oh, really? Wow.
So where you've got strong contrast, often an element that you might want to show off and showcase is contrast and is texture, and that can be more prevalent in a black and white image. Where you crush things contrast-wise in a color image, it can just make it too busy. But yeah, so overall, not a bad shot. I think the composition's probably the strongest thing here. The balance of the elements in the frame is nice.
Yeah.
I would have liked to see a different timing with the shot. Do something else with that sun.
Yeah.
I don't really like there just being a big white orb in the middle of my photo.
No, that's fair enough. This strikes me as like a really good sunrise shot, because like then you would have like all of this stuff illuminated, and like you'd have like a gradient going across the sky.
Yeah, definitely. And there's some conventions around landscape photography. If you'd asked a landscape photographer back in the film days, or even 10 years ago, they would say never shoot straight at the sun. That's changing a bit these days with just how good cameras are, with dynamic range and HDR stacking and all that stuff. You can get away with shooting at the sun. But yeah, the big orb, and you can see all the lens flare around it as well. To me, that's distracting, and it doesn't mesh with the theme. I'd love to see, if the theme is, Australian landscape, I'm wanting to see more details in the rocks, more details in the leaves. I want to see the, natural oranges and faded greens of, the Australian bush as being really the prominent feature showed off in the image.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Anything else to add, or would you like to move on to the next one?
Let's move on. I'm known to ramble, so cut me off if I just don't shut up.
I was going to say, I could just listen to you talking about photos.
Yeah, me too. I'm actually finding this fascinating.
Can you start a channel where it's just you talking hours? Because I love this.
Yeah, okay, so what immediately jumps out to me with this one is it's a much simpler composition.
Yeah.
There's less busyness, both in terms of contrast, but also just like textures in the scene. There's more big blocks of solid texture. So we've got the, the leading line of the dirt road curved off nicely. And, the clouds, which are also, are they blurred? Maybe not. Yeah, so another tip which I give a lot of my students when trying to, composition is a challenging thing for some people, particularly in landscape. The best, I see, amazing portrait photographers come to a landscape shoot and be completely lost into how to start framing up a shot. One of the easy tips I give people is make sure the foreground's clean. Because you can have textures in the midground that are away from the camera, and they don't distract you too much when they're in the midground or in the background. When they're in the foreground, it really makes the image so much busier, and it makes it harder to get the viewer's eye into the shot. So that was probably true of the first image we looked at in the waterfall shot.
Yeah.
A lot of textures around the foreground, particularly framing the image. It wasn't bad. It was by no means too busy. But you compare that to this shot where you've got a really clean foreground, and this image, I'm drawn into it much more because of that clean foreground. And I've spoken about timing with the last two shots. This is an example of good timing. We've got the rainbow in the shot, and the photographer wouldn't have been able to predict the rainbow, but has reacted to the changing conditions.
Yeah.
Found a different shot, and this time we're facing like northeast for this shot. To capture the rainbow, and composition wise, this is the strongest one we've seen so far. The tricky thing, the one which stands out to me is not necessarily working so well, is this tree in the foreground on the left.
You think it's a bit distracting?
It's not that it's distracting, it's been very deliberately placed there by the photographer, but it doesn't actually stand out. Another concept I like to talk about is like coherence and coordination.
Yeah.
So when you've got elements in the scene, lining them up in a way which works.
Yeah.
So the photographer's definitely channeled some of this where we've got the rainbow and it leads directly to the foreground element. That's great. That's showing, coordination in the elements. You've got one thing pointing to another thing. So that really works. But then we've got this shadow crossing across, which is intersecting with the dirt road, and does it work, does it not work? Well, I'm not sure. It's fine, but again, that's like a minor point. Overall, all the elements in the scene are actually working really, really well in this shot. Clean foreground. We've got a little bit of foreground interest, and it's got some nice space around it. The lines and stuff for the most part are working really, really well. Nothing's cropped off inappropriately. We've got nice elements in the foreground, midground, and background. It's not too busy. It's a strong image. I like this one.
Cool. All right, let's move on to the last one. There we are.
Thing which jumps out to me immediately on this one is that the sky's blown out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've had a technical issue here capturing enough dynamic range in the shot.
Yeah. And
we've lost the sky. That's, I'm coming from the perspective of a landscape photographer, so that stuff really jumps out to me.
It is an easy fix as well because you can just like create a new sky and then drop it in Photoshop.
You can create a new sky. I think the better fix is to get it right in camera. So these days the dynamic range of I don't know what this was shot on, but I'm assuming it's a full frame camera. It may not be, but the dynamic range you get on most modern sensors is generally enough that you can avoid huge blowouts like this.
Yeah.
If you're shooting in RAW, you often get a lot of wiggle room in the shadows, so you end up a better way of shooting is actually to underexpose a little bit.
Yeah.
Make sure you preserve your highlights and then you bring back shadows in post.
Yeah.
That's generally a pretty effective workflow. The other thing to do is if you really are pushing it in terms of what the sensor can handle, you can stack using HDR.
Oh yeah. I will point out that this photo is actually taken on a crop sensor because it was taken with a full frame camera using a crop sensor lens.
Composition wise, yeah, not bad. I think we've got a bit of a leading line that's formed with the running water, which is pointing you towards the person in the shot. Interesting sort of pose, grabbing attention in the middle of the frame. It all comes down to taste and aesthetic and what you're trying to achieve with your photograph. If you're just chucking it on Instagram, this is a really good look.
Yeah.
Trying to putting a person into the frame in a landscape shot is a really common trope on Instagram, and it is effective, and can make for really cool photographs. If you're going down like if you're wanting to like submit a photo for a competition or do a big print to hang on a wall, you don't have too many people in your photos.
Oh yeah, of course.
What about the rest of the image? So yeah, good leading line towards the person. That works as a composition. I don't mind where they're placed in the frame. We do have this big jutting element on the right, which is taking up like almost an eighth of a frame. And I'm asking myself, is that an interesting thing? Does it add stuff? Does it take away? Honestly, it's not too bad, but it is a big element. I would have maybe liked to see the photographer try to minimize that.
Like moving a couple steps closer.
Yeah, you could go closer. You might even have been able to go to the left a bit to work more with the natural line of the little rapids or waterfall section. It's hard to speculate without being there.
Yeah, well the waterfall section is quite thin, so like there's only a few vantage points that you can actually get. I imagine if you moved left, then you would lose pretty much all of this behind that big boulder.
That's true. Yeah.
So I think from what they've done, in my opinion, like they've sort of made the best of what was there.
And I'm not saying it's it's not the best of what you could do.
Yeah.
It's just it is jumping out as a big foreground element. Is it working with the theme?
Yeah.
It's hard to tell as well with a JPEG that we're essentially looking at how the sharpness is doing. It does look a bit soft to me in the background.
It is.
I wonder if we've either not focused to the right critical focus point or failed to have enough depth of field. A shot like this, if I'm speculating, it does look like the focal length's a little bit longer, so we're not super wide. When you're shooting on a longer focal length, you do need to like stop down quite far to get enough depth of field. So if this is, let's say this is shot at 40 or 50 mils equivalent, you might need f14 or f16 to get enough depth of field to cover this foreground rock, which is quite close, the midground and the background trees.
I think it's actually 18 millimeters at f22.
18 mils, but cropped, so
which is what?
27. Okay, I see exactly what's happened here. They didn't have an ND filter, so they've stopped down f22 to try and get blur in the water. And that's also why it's overexposed, because presumably it's again shot late afternoon. It looks like too much light. So to get around that, you'd want to use an ND filter rather than stopping down to f22. So the problem with f22, depending on how good your lens is, you introduce diffraction, which can soften the image really greatly. On a really good, like let's say L series glass or the Sony GM glass, you can get away with shooting at f20, f22, and it's not too bad. But if it's a mid-level sort of lens, it might not be super sharp at f22. But yeah, overall impressions of the photo. I think composition, again, not bad. An interesting composition, could definitely work. Technically, I think this photo falls short because of the overexposure and the depth of field issue. But certainly one where you'd go back and you'd take it again and fix those things. You could get quite a strong photograph. Okay, so the top one will be fourth worst.
Yes.
Yeah.
The winning photo is
The winning photo is the least worst.
Okay, so I think I've got to say this one's my least favourite. I don't think it's the worst composition, but it's just the technical things really stand out to me. Third place, this shot. Technically a stronger photograph, it's nice and sharp, and I don't mind the composition, the elements are well placed. I just think, the giant orb of light, not my favourite, and colours could have been better, and maybe some more detail in the shadows would have been nice. I'm going to make this one the runner-up. I think that it's a good example of a long exposure photograph, but there's just a couple of things which jump out to me as not being as clean. So yeah, this one's my favourite. As again, it's just a cleaner composition and executed well. I like the timing of this and reacting to the conditions and framing it up in a really pleasing way. That's skills that you really need as a landscape photographer.
All right, everybody, we have a winner. Andrew is going to come in and do the honours. So, drum roll, please.
You called it bad.
And the winner is Brad.
Hey! Woohoo!
Yeah.
That's amazing.
What the heck?
All right, well done.
Thank you, man.
Well done, bad luck.
Thanks for challenging. That was good fun.
Yeah. 4 times in a row, guys. 4 times. Yeah.
Cool. Well, big thank you to Andrew for coming down. Check out everything that he does, all his workshops. He knows his stuff. Very good.
Cheers, thanks for having me.
It's been really, really great having you on. I just want to listen to you talk about photos all day. It's too good. It's too good. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff.
And we finally did it.
I finally remembered.
That's the first time I remembered.
I remembered. I don't think I've done a sign off. And we'll see you in the next episode. Ooh.